Hi, how's it going? I'm back in the garage today looking at another cheap, tiny stick welder. I know, another one. But this one did seem a little different, or at least a little more extreme with the claims, so I decided to check it out. It is currently priced at $90 on Amazon, but I found it before Thanksgiving on sale for about $60. So let's talk about it. Let's get the ludicrous claims out of the way first. This is a 120 volt welder, but it claims to have 250 amps of output. Color me skeptical on that. But it will be interesting to see just how many amps it can put out, considering that the data tag claims an amp draw from the wall of 64.5 amps. Even a 20 amp breaker would trip pretty much instantly if that's true, and it's not likely that they intend it to be used with a dedicated high amperage circuit because the cord is just a standard 5-15P, which is a 15 amp, 120 volt plug. It also has the standard rubber stamp duty cycle of 60% at max output that most of the Chinese generic welders have. So they are supposedly rating this thing to pull an outrageous 7,700 watts from a standard outlet for 6 out of every 10 minutes. It's a good thing the breaker would trip instantly, because if it didn't, the welder would probably blow up, if it got a chance to, before an electrical fire burned your house down. The welder just has a single knob to adjust amperage and no other controls. The display shows the amperage setting on this particular machine, and it adjusts from 23 minimum to 248 max. So at least the display is seeming to pretty closely match the fact that they claim this thing ranges from 20 to 250 amps of output. The case of this welder is actually made of plastic, which is unique, and it leads to this welder being extra light. Not only is it tiny, it's the lightest welder I've ever checked out. The plastic may also help this welder get around the issue that some of these tiny stick welders have, where live internal components are dangerously close to the metal case. This case is plastic, so it's not a problem here. As for accessories, it's nothing too surprising. However, considering the price, it's nice that it does come with a carrying case and welding leads. It also comes with gloves, which are both left hand, and they seem to be made from reused cloth. This one here is particularly pretty inside. I may actually test fire resistance because these are not leather. In fact, there's definitely some plasticky, polyestery stuff in there that melts and drips when it gets hot, so I definitely wouldn't wear those while welding, because you never know. You can get a drop of something hot on there, next thing you know, you've got some melted plastic on your hand. Literally. Oh, it smells like burning rubber in here now too. It also comes with a few stick rods, which are a little banged up. One of those super cheap brush hammer tools. A carry strap, and one of those cheap handheld plastic face shields. As a bonus, it came with the strongest, most powerful chemical smell of any welder to date. The gloves in particular smell like they were rinsed in kerosene and slow smoked over a pile of burning tires. And that was before I burnt them, I promise. The work clamp is just a cheap alligator clip, and the electrode holder is actually stamped steel inside. If this welder could do anywhere near what it claims without tripping a breaker, it won't, don't worry, but just hypothetically, if it could put out anywhere near 250 amps, it would literally smoke both of these and the cables. The cables themselves are thin, they're short, they have aluminum conductors inside, and easy melt insulation outside. None of that is surprising for under $100, it just is what it is. The work clamp cable is just over 3 feet long, and the electrode holder cable is around 5 feet long. Compared to something like the tiny little ZX7 that I reviewed, which is a similar price but doesn't include cables, it's nice that this one does. It doesn't feel like you really gain that much when they're this cheap and short, but at least it is usable out of the box. And that's pretty much it. It's a basic, cheap, 120 volt stick welder that claims 250 amps of output. Nothing too surprising inside, but as I expected, with my hand for scale, Everything in here is just tiny, and I cannot imagine this thing being capable of 250 amps. But we will plug it in, see what it actually can do. Real quick, one thing I did kind of find that's funny while I was putting it back together, this is how the strain relief of the power cord was assembled when I initially opened it. And you can tell, you can see the marks where it was, clamped in between the case there. And when I went to put it back together, I thought, oh, well, it's supposed to go into these notches here, so I'll just assemble it like it's supposed to be. But what I found is that because of the width of this, it hits this plug and it can't go together all the way. So because of where they put this little board and the way they put it together, it actually can't be assembled with the strain relief for the cord assembled the way it's supposed to be. It has to be connected way out here. So I don't really think it hurts anything, but it's just kind of funny. It just goes to show, little things like that just aren't thought out very well on these kind of machines. Imagine my zero surprise when it became clear that this welder was not putting out nearly 250 amps. Maxed out, it wouldn't even run a 1/8 inch 7018. I switched to a 3/32 7018, and it started and ran that okay. I measured the output and found that it provided 91 amps when set at 250 amps. So it provides a little over 1/3 of what is claimed. 91 amps is actually pretty typical though for a 120 volt stick welder. And when maxed out, the welder draws 30 or so amps from the wall. And 30 amp draw is also pretty typical for a 120 volt welder with no power factor correction and 90 amps or so of output. You will definitely want a 20 amp circuit to run this welder maxed out. 30 amps would eventually trip a 20 amp breaker, but you can get away with it if you aren't welding long beads with no pauses. It does run 7018 pretty well, but arc voltage seems a bit low. It really requires you to keep a tight arc. In this shot, you can see a 7018 going out midway through a short bead. It's probably made worse by the tiny aluminum cables and cheap electrode holder and work clamp, which are all going to induce a little bit of voltage drop. And no surprise here, but it won't run a 6010. It will barely even start one, and the arc goes out almost instantly. With a maximum output of 90 amps, the electrode holder and work clamp do get the job done. With only a 5-foot or so power cord and the super short welding cables, you really can't get very far from an outlet. And considering that it draws 30 amps when maxed out, I'd recommend using the very shortest extension cord possible and at least 12 gauge wire. Ultimately, this welder works okay for a 90 amp stick welder. It runs 3/32 inch electrodes okay, other than cellulose rods. It's super compact, and it's super lightweight. I don't know how reliable it will be long term, but for $60, you could probably do worse. At the current price of $90, it's getting a bit close to better welders, but for $60, it's hard to complain. But I'll manage. This welder has some of the most blatantly exaggerated output claims I've ever seen. Granted, I never expected this welder to have 250 amps of output, but it is still the claim, and it is off by nearly a factor of 3. Not everyone will be able to test the output of a welder or has the experience to know the difference between what 90 amps and 250 amps of stick welding output is supposed to behave like. And it's not just a matter of misleading ads either. This welder itself is designed and built to completely misrepresent the output. Anyone just starting out or trying to learn could end up terribly frustrated if the welder they buy won't work at all the way the tutorial videos say it should. They may try to run a 1/8 inch rod at 125 amps and be totally unable to get it going, believing that they're doing something wrong. They may just get frustrated and give up. If they persevere, they may find that the welder will run a 3/32 inch rod if they set it to 250 amps, but that may still be confusing because everything they read online might say that a 3/32 rod should run at 80 to 100 amps. I'm just getting a little bit tired of the blatant lies on products like this. I mean, the data tag is where you should be able to go to get detailed, accurate data about a piece of equipment. And the data tag on this and so many other generic welders is just completely fabricated, completely inaccurate information. It's a little sad that I get excited when a welder I review actually has accurate specs on the data tag. It's sad to say, but just know to take any claims from a product like this with a heaping bowl of salt. And if you do pick one of these up, I'd recommend against using the gloves. The outer fabric layer held up better than I expected, but the stitching is flammable. It burns and melts, plus the interior is lined with recycled polyester fabric from who knows where. If you accidentally grab something hot while welding, you don't want to end up with melted plastic stuck to your hands inside the gloves. Plus, I don't know about you, but I only have one left hand. So hopefully this was helpful and gives you some idea of what to expect from this little welder. If you have any questions, or if there's anything else you'd like me to test out with this welder, let me know. And as always, thanks for watching. Take care.